So, how did I go from breaking my toe and being completely broke in 2024 to now having a business that generates $20,000 months in revenue and being able to have the location freedom to stay in different places around the world? Let's talk about it. So, my mindset coach and I have had a conversation. Part of Modern Day Renaissance Man. If you don't know, look them up on YouTube. But we were talking about the bridge of incidents, right? Because I was just talking to him and I was telling him about my story, right? And how I've never really told my story. How I've told people, but I've never really put my story out there about even why I'm doing this or how I got to this position. And when I started to think about it, there was a catalyst that projected me into a completely different direction that I didn't even know about at the time. Now, if you watched my previous video, you know that I've been a freelancer in multiple different industries, right? Multiple different industries. But the industry that I was in for the longest was the live events industry, specifically audiovisual, right? Being an audiovisual technician. So we're setting up cameras and speakers and microphones and lights and all these other things and, technicians to work them and do all these things. And throughout that period, like I said, I was under an illusion of freedom, thinking that I had freedom. But I didn't mention what that incident was that actually catapulted me into a completely different direction that I didn't even realize at the time. And it's funny because I look back at it and I'm really just a completely different person because emotionally and internally, I used to react so much different in this situation, whereas now it's completely dissolved. I don't even have any of those emotions, thoughts, or feelings that I used to back then. And I'll get into what I mean about that when I tell my story. But it's just so, to really reflect on it and think about it is just so amazing because that true change has really happened. But long story. I'm not going to say long story short because it might be a long story. So get your popcorn ready. But I was a freelancer, right, in the audiovisual industry. And I got into it because I had a family friend who owned an audiovisual company. So I give so many props and shout outs to him because he was really what got me into the industry and gave me my foot in the door. And he saw the potential in me. So as he saw the potential in me, he gave me more responsibility. He allowed me to lead more, right? And it got to a point where after my first year of working with him as like strictly a freelancer, right, and just working on different jobs and different gigs, he asked me if I wanted to work with him full time. Now, I was still in a contractor role, right? So even though I was working full time and I would be getting a consistent check at this point, I was still a contractor. So I didn't have any benefits. I didn't have any insurance. I didn't have any PTO. I didn't have any of that, right? I was still under the frame of being a freelancer, even though I was receiving a consistent check every other week. Now, I didn't mind because with this, I still had opportunity to work other gigs if we didn't have anything going on. And like I've told you all before, the live events industry is cyclical in nature. It's seasonal. So there are going to be seasons where things are pretty slow. But even when things were slow, I still wanted to try and build the business because I've always had this type of mindset, right? Of business development, of business growth. So even when we had slow seasons where we didn't have any particular jobs, I would still try to find ways, okay, how can we promote the business? How can we do outreach? How can we do marketing? How can we set up something so that when we're not physically on a site, we're still able to get more contracts for later down the line? And I took on that role, right? So I was doing client interactions, I was doing invoicing, discovery calls, writing out invoices, contracting, the whole nine, right? So I was doing all of that. And also leading on site too. I was the on-site contact. I was the technical lead. I was the main point of contact for the client. So I also had to lead the team of technicians. And there were some pretty big shows that we had where there were probably about 7 to 8 technicians, and we had a whole bunch of rooms in a hotel, right? A general session room, all these different breakout rooms. And I had to facilitate all of that and lead all of that. But it came to a point in 2024 where we were doing a job, really, really small job at a restaurant. And we're loading the equipment off the truck, and we have these 2 speakers on this cart. And I'm rolling it on the sidewalk. And if you're from DC, you know exactly how DC sidewalks are. I hit a little crack, right? The speakers start tumbling over. Now, me thinking in the mind of, I don't know what I was thinking, but I don't want to say thinking the mind of a freelancer. I'll say that, but I decided to save the speaker, so to say. I failed at saving the speaker, but I tried to save the speaker. So I tried to get in front of it and stop this 40-pound speaker from falling over and hitting the sidewalk. And it slipped and fell right on my toe, right on my left toe. And it hurt. It hurt. It really did hurt. But in that moment, I was like, okay, it'll wear off, whatever the case is. So we go in there, we set everything up, and then I'm starting to limp, right? And my toe is like really, really starting to hurt, starting to throb. Long story short, it turns out it's broken, right? Figure that out. Toe is broken. And I'm like, dang. So I go to patient first. They put me in, it wasn't a cast, but I can't remember what it's called. They put me in something, right? Wrap my toe, put me in something. And then I call my boss and I'm like, look, my toe is broken, But because of the way things have been set up and the contract that I signed, right, to be full-time as a full-time contractor, even though that wasn't really the case. I was just getting a consistent check. Like I said, illusion. It goes back to if you haven't watched my first video about this, please watch that, because as I'm recalling all of these events, it makes even more sense. I was so much under the illusion of true freedom. And this was the moment that actually brought my eyes to be able to see it in true light. So long story short, my toe's broken and I'm like, okay, how are we going to pay these medical bills, right? I get some workers' comp, I do something, right? And based off of the contract that I signed, right, I have to basically cover myself, right? And because this was a family friend, I didn't want to get too far into the weeds of legalities and, some people gave me suggestions on some legal things that I could have done, but this was a true family friend that I respected, so I didn't want to go that route. But not only did I have to pay for my own medical bills because of that, right? And then going to get the x-rays and, all these other things, I also was not getting paid for the work that I missed. So my toe was broken and it took me a little minute until I could get in a boot. And I wanted to get an x-ray, like a proper x-ray before I started walking on it and walking around. So when I started to realize like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get paid for the jobs that I don't do. They're going to have to take it out of my check because they have to pay somebody else. So because they got to go pay somebody else to replace me, whatever they pay them is coming out of my check. And, freelancers charge different rates. So once I heard that, I only missed one job. And then I went to Amazon and bought literally everything that could allow me to move around, right? I bought myself a scooter. I bought myself everything, right? I bought myself my own boot, but I didn't want to start walking on it until I had that official x-ray. So I do all of that and I'm pushing through. I'm back on the next job. I only missed one job because I'm like, I can't afford to lose a whole check and I have to pay for these medical bills. So I'm going to have to find some way to get back to work, right?
Wait, how?
This is what I mean when I say you only have an illusion of freedom as a freelancer. But during this period and during this time was when I really recognized that I didn't have any protection for myself. I didn't have any systems in place. I wasn't aware that if something like this happened, how would I move? What would I do? I didn't have any plans in place for that, right? I mean, I was young, 25, right? I mean, I'm 27 now. I just turned 27, but 25 at the time. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I'm young, I'm strong, I'm, healthy, capable. I'm not going to get injured, right? So during that time, I started having these thoughts as I was recovering and as I was on jobs. And I started to really kind of see the fact that at the end of the day, business is business, right? And if you don't protect yourself and you don't put plans and things in place, plans and procedures in place to protect yourself and make sure that you have yourself covered, you're going to get messed up out here. Easy. You're going to get messed up out here. Easy. Easy. The same way that companies that hire full-time employees can just cut them like that, it's just as ruthless when it comes to freelance, right? So all of that was happening, and I say, you know what? I have to start my own LLC, and I have to start building my own business. And that was when I got the idea for CC Solutions, right? Which is my LLC. And that was when I said, look, I have all of the expertise. I've built up all of this expertise over these past 3 years at the time. And I know how to do client relations. I know how to work on site. I know how to do everything from A to Z, from the first discovery call all the way to the debrief after the event, and everything in between, from contracting to invoicing to securing labor to loading up the truck to everything. I know how to do everything because I've been doing it, right? So why am I in this position? Why am I not reaping the benefits of all of this expertise and skills that I've built up over this time? It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. Literally no sense. So I really started to ask myself, what am I going to do? And I said, I got to start my own business. So I came to the conclusion of, if I can do all of these skills, all I have to do is get my own clients, right? So I started to do that, and I was still working with this family friend, this company, right, that was owned by the family friend. I still was working with them full time, but I started to build up my own business on the back end. And I started to build up my own business, and I really started taking advantage of the fact that if we didn't have a gig, I could either work another gig or do something else. So I took all of that time to start building up my own thing. And it started to cause some conflict. It started to cause some issues because there were things that started to get busy that I had already started to pre-plan other stuff for, right? Because I was really, really dead set on starting to make my exit and do my own thing. And I remember there came a point where we had a job and we had a gig that was during the summer. And this was also the same time of a conference in the audiovisual industry that I was planning to go to. And I knew I needed to go to that conference because it was going to be so beneficial for me to network, to meet people, to get my name out there for people to see my face, so on and so forth. And I had to make a decision. I had to make a hard decision. I remember I was in the gym, in the sauna, and I was just sitting there and I was contemplating. I was like, am I going to make this call? Am I going to really do this? This is the point right here. I have to do it. And I made the call, and I told him I couldn't go. He said, what do you mean you can't go? I said, I can't go. And he said, this is the one conference that, like, this is the most important conference of the year. And I said, I understand. And I was like, I can't go. And it was at that moment that I knew I had to make the decision to stop going full time, right? To end that contract, right? And it was the best decision that I could have made. It was a tough decision. And what followed that was a series of, that was what, June of 2025 to really, if you think about it, it wasn't that long, because it was June of 2025, or I'll say May of 2025. So that's June, July, August, September. It was about 4 months. 4 months of financial turmoil, 4 months of not knowing how I'm going to pay bills, 4 months of losing that consistent check that I had gotten so comfortable with. And that was another thing, is that I was so comfortable receiving that consistent check and also taking other gigs when we didn't have anything going on. I was kicking back. I was chilling. I wasn't worried about anything, man. I was making money. I was making $5,000 a month guaranteed, and also had time to be able to pick up other gigs on the side. Like, it was, the life was sweet. It was sweet. And it's not like I was working crazy. We had times where, you know, there were really, really busy seasons and really, really busy spurts, but I honestly probably was not averaging 40 hours a week. There were very high leverage tasks, but I wasn't averaging 40 hours a week, if I'm being honest. So I had it sweet. Why wouldn't I Why would I want to do anything else? Why would I want to change anything? Because there's no need, right? I'm getting $5,000 a month guaranteed, and then also have another chance to, if we have a week where there's no gigs, I can make another $2,500 just because. So I got comfortable. And when that got pulled from me, I shouldn't say pulled, but when I gave that up, I had to get really uncomfortable. And it started with me recognizing that I didn't have any financial discipline, right? That was literally what was keeping me afloat. I didn't have any financial discipline. I didn't have any ways to generate that amount of income consistently. And I went through about 4 months of financial turmoil, emotional turmoil, trying to figure out how I'm gonna pay bills, how I'm gonna do this, whatever the case is, borrowing money from my mom a lot, right? Borrowing money from family a lot, going into debt, right? Credit cards overcharged, not being able to pay loans that I had previously gotten into, credit score plummeting, a whole bunch of things, right? A whole lot. So that really caused me to recognize what I have to do and how I have to change. And over time, I started to recognize that it's not as difficult as I think it is. It may be hard right now, and I may be in financial stress right now, but because I built up the skill set and because I built up everything that I need to be able to support a company that makes 7 figures, I've built up those skills. So those skills are still with me. Even though I'm not with the company, the skills are still with me. So why would I go and lease out those skills to another company and get paid $60K a year when I could just build my own thing and make 7 figures? Why would I do that? So I started to pivot. I pivoted more towards the video agency content creation side of things because that was a quicker cash flow and a quicker sales cycle than the audiovisual industry, although the audiovisual industry has much higher ticket contracts. So I started doing both, but I pivoted a little bit more towards the video agency. And that was when things really started to take off after some time. And in October, that was when we hit our first 20K month. Hit our first 20K month in revenue. Not going to say it was in profit, but in revenue. And the profit margin was over 50%. But that was my very first time being able to prove to myself that I can make 4 times what I made being a full-time employee with the skills that I've built up while working for them. 4 times. But I have to say this, it was not simply because I took the route of being a freelancer and just decided to do everything on my own. No. I wouldn't have been able to do it if that were the case. I had to switch my mindset. I had to change my identity from being a freelancer to being a true entrepreneur. And once I started to make that mindset shift, that's when things really started to change. And there was still that residue of being a freelancer throughout that 20K month in October because I was so financially strapped and in survival mode so much that I was going to take everything. If there was money coming my way, I was taking it, whether it was a freelance gig, whether it was a gig for the video agency, whatever. And I was also selfishly trying to make sure I took home as much profit as possible without recognizing what is the best decision for the business, for the entire business to scale, right? But you learn from these things and you have shifts in perspective and shifts in identity and shifts in mindset, which allow you to grow even further and go even farther. So it's crazy for me to think that I'm here right now in Medellin and I'm out here visiting for now. I have about another week here, and then I go back to DC. But the next time I come back out here, I'm going to be out here permanently. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't break my toe back in 2024. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't go through all of that financial stress, that financial turmoil, that identity crash, really, right? Of me asking myself, what am I doing, right? How did I think that everything was going to be good and then now this happens and everything just completely went bad, right? If none of that would have happened, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have the location freedom, the financial freedom. I wouldn't have the ability to service clients while I'm here, right? Clients are being serviced as I'm making this video. Money is being made as I'm making this video. Invoices are being sent, invoices are being paid as I'm making this video. So I'm not here on vacation. I'm living, right? I'm living a true Renaissance lifestyle. Shout out to modern day Renaissance man. So that's the only way. That's the only way. I mean, that's my story. And I'm excited to see where we go, how we take things from here. Definitely a lot more to learn, a lot more to improve upon. Definitely a lot more systems to solidify within the business and step into true entrepreneurship and attain true freedom. But it's an ever-going process. It's an ever-going process. And this is the start. But it all started with the bridge of incidents. And the start of the bridge of incidents is usually something, I don't want to say catastrophic, because in the grand scheme of things, like relax. Got a roof over your head, like relax. It could be a whole lot worse. So I don't want to say catastrophic, but something has to happen that forces you into a completely different direction. And for me, it just so happened to be me breaking my left toe, which I still feel aches and pains from to this day. I don't think it's fully healed. But, regardless, but what I will say is that I would take that happening versus it never happening, right? If that never would have happened, I would still be in that same position. I would still be completely comfortable, but unsatisfied with my life. And now, look at where we are, right? So I'll take that broken toe and dealing with aches and pains from time to time any day over it never happening and me staying where I was, because that was the incident that bridged all of the other interactions and experiences and moments that got me here where I am today. So I'll leave you with this. If you know where you want to go and where you are in life is not there, ask yourself, what incident has happened that I haven't paid attention to that was there to push me into a completely different direction? Because it might have already happened, but you either chose to ignore it or you didn't realize that that was the incident that was starting to create the bridge. I could have easily just taken the victim mentality and been like, oh, well, I should sue him and he should pay me because this happened on the job and da-da-da-da-da and blah, 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 blah. But would that have bridged me to where I am today? I don't think so. So I want you to reflect on that. I want you to think about what incident has happened to you that probably that bridge to get you to the life that you want to get to. I'll catch you in the next one.
Audiovisual oder